violins, cellos. Serenity and I are going to be, we're from a fairly upper strings sort of point of view, but we're doing very basic concepts today. So I think that should be, even if you are yourself a bass player or a cello player, hopefully there's some kind of usefulness that you'll be able to gain from this. So Serenity's going to start off with bow holds, telling us how to do a good bow hold.
Okay, so bow holds. First thing to think about is, why do we have a special bow hold? Why can't we just hold them like this? And I encourage all of you to try holding it like this and see how you move and how you're constrained. Like, of course you can play. You can almost do everything. You just can't do it very easily. So it's always good when you're thinking about technique is, what is it for? What is it trying to help you do? So when we work out our bow holds, what we're aiming for is maximum sort of flexibility and strength so that you can move your hand to keep your bow straight on the instrument. Which of course means that the angle of your fingers and your wrist have to be changing it at all the time. Does that all make sense? So I'll talk you through my bow hold. Sarah, if you've got little variations, you're welcome to bring them in. And it's not that every bow hold needs to be exactly the same, but it has to be able to do what you need it to do. So I usually start with the thumb and have it, for me it's, I'll make sure you can see this, beside the black bit, never in the black bit, and so that the tip is touching the wood. And then how shall we do this? Let's have the middle fingers. I like to think of it as if you were trying to hang your fingers off, that's where they would be touching. So it's not quite in the crease, it's sort of in the crease and a little bit of that second segment. Sorry, make sure I can see what I'm doing. Then the little finger is the most important one. It has to sit on the end and it has to be straight, because that's one of the ones that has to move the most. And it's unfortunate for us that it's the littlest finger that has to hold all the weight of the bow, but that's just the way it is. And this one, the pointer finger, should be somewhere between the first and second joints and shouldn't be allowed to try and control things. That's, if you get a harsh sound, it's very often because this one is trying to control what's going on. So does that all make sense so far? And then when you've got all your fingers on and your bow's just out in the air, it should feel like there's a lot of weight here on the little finger. You can see that muscle has to do a lot of work.
I would like to say just one thing, make sure that your thumb is bent. What Serenity was talking about of having the tip of her thumb in there, to do that, your thumb is going to have to bend, and that's super important. If it's not bent, you'll end up with all of your fingers kind of looking like this, and well, it's not going to work very well.
Because straight fingers aren't flexible.
Exactly.
So you want to get your bow holds out. Sarah, you can come up with some exercises, but one I like to just do is try and keep everything touching, but how much can you move? You hold the bow still without letting it go. How much can you move? Particularly, I like to make the little finger work in and out. That's the easy version when you're holding onto the bow. The harder version is when you're not. And it does little seesaws.
Awesome.
If that one,
sorry,
please, if that's a bit easy, try it around the other way.
Oh, that's a good one.
You don't want to do, but it shows you how important the little finger is, because it's holding all of the weight. None of the other fingers our weight bearing. It's just that little one. What were you going to say, Sarah?
So I've got an exercise to help with that. So that muscle that's doing all the work that Serenity showed you before, it's that little one right there. So that's a muscle in our hands that doesn't usually actually have to do that much work unless we're kind of making fists or that. Yeah, exactly. I see a couple of you pointing to that bit. That is the muscle. Now, just like when you go to the gym and you work and get all your muscles nice and strong, there's a couple of exercises that you can do with your bow to help build that muscle as well. And one of the first ones that I teach is something I call pinky push-ups. So it's kind of like doing a push-up. I know some of you will have done those. This one, it's important that we keep everything still except the pinky. So your wrist is going to stay nice and still, your hand is going to stay nice and still and relaxed, and if you need to, sometimes you can put your hand just along a table just to make sure that it all stays still. So if you were going to, I'll grab this music stand here to show you what I mean with that. You might be able to just kind of pop it on the edge there so that it stays nice and still. Now what you're going to do is that pinky, basically with your hand position in place, that pinky is going to straighten and then bend like that. And when you put it on the bow, what happens? Everything else must stay completely still and just the pinky moves. And it's like doing a little press up. The only muscle that should be working basically is that one there. And you'll find I usually get people to do about 10 of these. Make sure that you're not cheating by using your wrist or using your other fingers or using your hand. It's literally just that pinky. That's
Yes.
only...
It's straight. That's not using the muscle properly.
Exactly. So if you have a look, I'll try and put it a bit closer. It's going to be bent and then I straighten it down, pressing down using that muscle, and then let it come back and bend back up. So just making sure that the only movement that's happening, if I take the bow away, is that. Everything else is just staying nice and passive and moving along with the bow as it moves, but that movement is all coming from the pinky. And I'd say start off with 10 of those a day and see if you can work it up until you're doing about 30. And it's honestly a really great exercise for that muscle to get it nice and strong. Did you have any other bow hold things, Serenity?
Oh, one of the ones I like to get people to do is holding the bow up straight and see how still you can keep the bow, tapping just the first finger and then just the second finger and just the third finger and just the little finger.
Well, that's a good one. I quite like that.
And if you really want, you can take your thumb out, but that's next level.
Oh, that was hard.
I had one years ago who had this, she had this amazing thing you could do where you only hold the bow with the last two fingers, ring finger and pinky finger. If you have everything exactly in the right place, and I can only sometimes do it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no.
Then just surface tension is enough, but everything has to be exactly in the right place.
Very clever. All right, so once you feel really comfortable with that bow hold, obviously it's always going to be a little bit different depending on your particular hand and also your instrument. It's a little bit different for cello and basses, obviously. Then now the next thing that we want to talk about is right arm positioning for string crossing. Now this obviously is quite different for cello and basses but the same principles are going to apply. This whole thing, hang on, put this down for a sec. This whole thing, basically your bow arm starts back here. It starts right back here at your shoulder blade. And this all works as a unit, all the way along right up to your fingertips. Now, when we cross the string, what's really important is that this whole unit has to work together. So if everybody, just without your instrument, you don't need it for a moment, just have your nice beautiful bow hold that you've just worked on and just do that for me. Just go up and down as if you're crossing the strings. Now the next thing we're going to do is picking up your instruments. You're now going to do it across the strings on your instrument. So excuse me, I'm going to make a wee bit of noise here. So I want you to all do that and try, if you can, to keep this whole unit together. What we don't want is to end up kind of doing that sort of thing. See if you can keep everything nice and stable. So everybody do it by yourselves. Yep, I'm seeing some pretty good. That's looking pretty good. Good. You should be playing. If you can, you should hear your own sound. I won't be able to hear you, but keep going. Yep, I'm seeing some really good ones. Awesome. Now the next, so that's the first thing, is just to do one big sweep.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Just one thing with that. Do you think of it as, I always think of it as you're being pulled down and then pulled back the other way. So you're never trying to pull. You're just flowing along, being pulled.
Yeah, that's a really nice visualization. Exactly. So that feeling of being pulled that way and then pulled that way, and your arm is just going with it.
It's always easy to go down because you've got gravity on the side.
Yeah.
So you have to imagine the same pulling feeling on the way up.
Awesome. Okay, the next thing that I was going to say about this, so that's those nice big sweeps, that feeling of being pulled and that feeling of going across the strings. The next thing to be really good at is to know exactly which string you need to be on. There's a little exercise for this. It's kind of for beginners, but it's quite good to remind yourself of it. I know there are times that I actually still do it now. So we're going to start on your lowest string, whatever that is. We'll do a bow, stop the bow, and then move perfectly to the next string and then play. Same thing. Same thing. And then do the same the other way round. So making sure that you really check carefully that your bow is exactly on the right string, and make sure that you stop in between the string changes. Good. Now this is something that is also really, so if that's the basic exercise, but it's something that I do a lot with pieces that I'm learning, because very often when we're playing something and it's a bit messy, quite often it's actually this guy's fault rather than the left hand. So something that I very often do is take away the left hand, take away those notes, and just make sure that my bow is exactly on the right strings it needs to be. This is really important for double stops as well. So you might have to be doing a double stop piece where you've got to go. So making that, just taking that completely away from the piece, making it really nice and slow, and seeing exactly what has to move. You'll find that certain bits of your arm have to move differently depending on what string you're playing on. So those little tiny things sound very, very basic, but honestly, I still do them with pieces that I'm learning, just taking it away and making sure that my right arm knows exactly where it's at. Sorry, Serenity?
Yes, absolutely same. If it's messy, it's usually just because I'm not, my arm's not ready to play on that string.
Mm.
Like if my arm's trying to play on the A string and I'm actually on the C string, it just doesn't sound good.
Yeah. And taking it to that level where it's so slow and so abstract just gives your muscles a bit of time to find themselves, and then you can put it back in. But actually figuring out, letting your hand know and your arm know what string they should be on is very, very important. I wanted to make sure that as we go along, we're having little moments to have questions about any concepts or anything that you guys are struggling with specifically about things that we're talking about. So if there's specific things that you struggle with string crossing, totally put up your hand and go, I've got this question here, and we can answer them as we go along. So otherwise, I know we'll probably forget them when we get to the end. Anybody got any questions at the moment? No?
Had a question. Clemens, did you have a question? You're all good? Great.
All good? Okay.
Sarah, maybe one thing just related to that.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about how this angle should be, like I know some people play quite with the elbow quite a bit lower beneath the wrist, and some people play above. I find if that top bit from the hand to the wrist is reasonably straight here, which means the curve on the bottom, that tends to be the best. I always say to my students, if you can play like Heifetz, you can do whatever technique you like. I don't care. The things that worked out tend to work the best for most people.
Yeah. And there's physiological reasons for that. The reason that your arm works the best like this is because nothing is being pulled. When you're like this, tendons and things are actually being pulled across bits where they shouldn't be. And there's extra kind of strain being placed on them. So if all of you do that for a second and then try and make a fist, how strong is that fist? I don't know about you, but mine is super weak. I could barely even hold anything in that. And then do this and make a fist. That fist is going to be so strong. And then do that and try and make a fist. So you can see when you're like this, it's just how your body's built. That's where your strength is. So, and I think that personally, that's how I kind of try and play the violin all the time, is what's the easiest way to do it? If there's tension that doesn't need to be there, it's going to get in the way. If you're really struggling to do something, the reason will be that something's in a position that's making it difficult, or you're holding tension somewhere and it's making it difficult. So yeah, what Serenity is saying about that position, make it the strongest position and the easiest position for your arm to move, and it'll be easier to play. Awesome. Any questions about that? Sorry, Serenity.
That was great.
Any questions about anything we've covered so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
Hello there, Kahurangi. My question is concerning speedy passages. When you're playing a lot of crotchets, which part of your arm do you find you're using more? Do you find you're using the forearm or the wrist more?
I'll say what I do first, and then Serenity, I'm sure, can add to that. So, are you talking about something really fast, like something like that sort of speed? So I find that the impetus is coming from here in a very relaxed way, but then the wrist has to be very, very relaxed to be able to react to that movement. So trying to play just by going like that, I think creates a lot of tension. I think that the feeling comes a little more from here, but the movement is going to be more the wrist. Does that kind of make sense? Sort of, yeah?
What Sarah said, it's like if you're watching someone, it might look like most of the movement is coming from the wrist, but the impetus is coming from here. So I sort of think of it as make the bigger muscles do the work, and the littler muscles can be the flexible to let the impetus go through.
Yeah, awesome. Any other questions before we move on to our next little topic? No? Awesome. I think Serenity's, well, actually, exactly what we just got to. You were going to talk a little bit about wrist flexibility, right? Perfect.
Well, here's another one which we can try without those first, is just holding your forearm still and trying to make big circles. If any of you have ever done kapa haka and done poi, it's wonderful for wrist strength and flexibility. Now, the good news is you don't actually have to be able to move that much while you're playing. But it's related to what Sarah was saying before. You just have to let the movement go through. So it's like the impulse comes from here. Let's say if we're going fast, and your wrist and your fingers and everything have to just not get in the way. Does that make sense? And that's the case whether you're playing fast or playing slow. Sorry, I might have to move around so you can see what I'm doing. And you notice if I'm at the heel, the wrist has to be at a bit of an angle because we can't fit our arm properly without being very strange. So at the top, at the heel, you've got that little bit of an angle, and then as you move, right at the tip it goes to the other way. And this, I don't know how relevant this is for violinists, but very often for violists, you will find that if you don't strain and you get to and you're now half the bow, this is as far as you can go naturally. Like very often, because of the size of violas, we don't actually get to the tip without warping something. Because if you look, if I go any further, I could, but I would be locking that joint, and it's the worst thing is to make anything straight and locked. So I go as far as it feels natural. And however far away from the tip that is, that's my tip. Sarah, is there something you want to add to that?
No, it's exactly the same on the violin. I mean, violin and viola bows are actually not that different in length. They're a bit. I know viola bows are a bit tend to be a bit heavier.
Further away, that's the thing.
Actually, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think of that. But it's the same thing. Whatever your tip is where you can get to without doing all of this kind of stuff. So if this is where you can get to without everything going haywire, that's your tip. I mean, I can just get to here, but I do it by actually taking my body away a little bit. That's how I get to the tip, because I'm not an enormous human being. My arms aren't super long, so that's my way of dealing with it, is to pull the rest of my body a little bit away when we really have to be at the tip. But usually that's for orchestra things where we're doing kind of tremolo right at the tip or something like that. There's very little time where we actually have to be really ultra at the tip.
Yes, if there's a conductor who desperately wants things completely at the tip, I'll actually just move my viola closer.
Yeah.
Make it easier.
Yeah, exactly. So so talking about wrist flexibility, I think the next thing we were going to talk about is playing with a straight bow, which you need wrist flexibility for. So what Serenity was saying about everything having to move. So as you go down, your wrist is doing that. As you move down, as you come up, it's moving up like this. And I always like to think of it as, have you guys ever lie in a pool or something? You drag your arm through the water. It's that kind of feeling. You're not forcing your wrist down or forcing it up. It's this feel of it being just kind of lightly dragging through something very soft. And the way that your wrist moves is a result of that big movement that you're doing up here. So the absolute easiest way, and the first thing that I make every single student that starts the violin do, is stand in front of a mirror and play straight bows. And again, I still do this because you have to keep yourself honest about straight. What you think is straight when you're looking from this angle is nonsense. You can't tell. So standing in front of a mirror, honestly, is really the best way to do it. So right now it's perfect because all of you are sitting in front of screens. You can watch yourself. So everybody, let's put your instruments up. Same for, where have we got? Oh, we've got a cello down there. There's one. I see one. Good. So same for you. It's very similar, that you're going to, obviously your weight distribution is different, but it's the same thing, that you have to adjust your wrist slightly and have that wrist flexibility to keep your bow straight. So let's all pick whatever string you like. I'm going to go for A string. And we're going to do straight bows. Now watch yourself in the screen. We're going to go from the heel, keeping it really straight. Everybody watching yourself in the screen. When you get to your tip, you can stop. And now we're going to go back up, watching yourself in the screen. Keep it really straight. So what we're aiming for, your kind of base of where you're going to aim for, is to be somewhere in the middle of the string. Now, so middle of the string, I mean between the fingerboard and the bridge. That should be your kind of baseline from where you play. You're going to change that all the time. Depending on the sound that you want, you're going to change where your bow is. You might want something a little bit more tough, so you're going to move down to the fingerboard. You want something stronger, a bit harsher sound, you're going to move up towards the bridge. But what you should know and what your body should feel really clearly is the middle of the string and keeping it really those parallel lines all the way along. So you're making a parallel line between your fingerboard and your bridge. And if you can do that without thinking about it, just with being able to just do it straight away, then that's a really good base point to work from. And I think the quickest and easiest way to find that is to stand in front of a mirror and play things all the time. For years when I was a teenager, my practice spot was in my bedroom, standing in front of a mirror. And honestly, it just makes such a difference. I still do it now and notice myself. It's dreadful. There are times when I haven't done it for a while. I do it again and notice how dreadfully crooked I've become in one certain bit, or I'm doing something a bit funny. So standing in front of a mirror just is the best way to be your own teacher. Did you want to add anything to that, Serenity?
This is, I can segue slightly into the next topic, but
I was gonna, I've got a little exercise to do with this that I think helps with straight bow playing. So after you've done lots of your standing in front of the mirror practice and you think you're nailing those straight bows, they're sounding awesome. Obviously you're looking at your wrist, making sure the wrist is flexible, making sure that all of this unit is working really well together. There's an exercise that I've stolen this from Jonathan Tanner, who's a beautiful violinist who's a friend of Serenity and mine. He plays in the CSO and he's a wonderful teacher, and I steal things from him all the time that he shows me. He's really brilliant. Now, this is an exercise that as soon as he gave it to me, I made all my students do it, and I've been doing it as well. We're going to start, I'll explain it to you first because it's a wee bit complicated. We'll start at the heel and your first finger is going to be lifted up, and then we're going to go down, and as we go down, first finger goes down, pinky comes up, third finger comes up, and second finger comes up. And when we get to the tip, we're going to just have these two. We're going to have our thumb and our first finger down. Then we're going to do an up bow, and we're going to do that in reverse. So we're going to start just with our thumb and our first finger, then the second finger goes, third finger goes, pinky goes, and first finger comes up. So we'll do that all together. I'll yell things out as I'm playing it. So let's all start together at the heel, making sure that you start off really nice and straight and your first finger is lifted before we begin. So bow on the string, first finger lifted. Right, now starting down, first thing that happens, first finger goes down, pinky comes up, third finger comes up, second finger comes up. Now we've got to the end, we should just be with our thumb and our first finger. Now up bow, we're going to put second finger down, third finger down, pinky down, first finger up. Now, I love what this does. If you do it a few times in a row, what you'll find is that you do this really nice natural kind of weight change across your hand, and it helps hugely with playing with a straight bow. I can't explain why. I'm sure there's complicated reasons, but I noticed that when I started doing it as a part of a warm-up, my hand just felt so comfortable. Oh, hang on. Can I do that a few times, please? Yes. All right, let's do it a couple more times, and I'll yell out instructions while we go. All right, so starting at the heel, our first finger is lifted off the bow, nice and relaxed, nothing needs to be tense. We're going to start our down bow, first finger goes down. Now lifting your fourth, lifting your third, lifting your second. We're going to get to the tip with just first and thumb. Now up bow, second finger down, third finger down, pinky goes down, first finger comes up, and one more time. So first finger down, pinky goes up, third finger up, second finger up. And now up bow, second comes down, third comes down, pinky comes down, first comes up. Good. Did that make sense to everyone? Do you feel what that's doing to your hand? That you're kind of feeling this weight distribution going across? I'm getting some thumbs up. Good. I love that exercise, so I still do it, and I recommend it highly. I think it helps a lot with the feel of your wrist moving, and it helps a lot with the balance in the bow. Awesome.
Yes, just to add to that, I love this exercise as well, is that, again, if you're getting a harsh sound, it's very often because you've got the wrong part of your hand is controlling the weight of the bow. Like if you're in the bottom half and your hand is tilted so that it's being controlled by the first finger, the sound is always harsher because you're pushing it out instead of letting it ring.
Mm-hmm.
So you can feel when you're holding it like this, it sort of feels like you can't control things.
Mm.
But it's because you're just letting the string ring. You're not forcing it, and it can feel you can be sort of anxious about letting go in that way, but it makes the sound much smoother.
Yeah, and like just talking about sound production in that way with what you're talking about, the way that your instrument produces sound is by sound waves, which we create with vibration. So vibration is what all the instruments use in various ways to create their sound. Our vibration is these things waggling to make their vibration. Now, if you're nice and relaxed and just letting the weight of the bow do it, everybody just do that for a moment. Don't press into the string, just pull the string, pull your bow across and have a look at your string while you do that. So what you should see is that your string is probably vibrating quite wide when you do that, especially if you do it with a fairly quick bow and you just let it sweep across, you'll see quite a wide vibration. Now, if you're doing what Serenity was talking about, you kind of grip with that first finger and press in, do the same thing again. What I notice when I do that, if I'm pressing hard into the string, what happens is you decrease the amount that the string can vibrate, and therefore you actually decrease your sound. So sometimes the things that we do to try and make more sound end up making less sound if we're kind of pressing rather than just allowing the weight and allowing relaxation to create our sound. We're going to stop our vibrations from being able to happen. And it's honestly, I think it's everybody's kind of natural thing to do. You think, I'm going to try and make more sound by kind of digging, and very often it has the opposite effect, unfortunately.
Yes, related to this, and we're starting to segue into legato. An exercise I've seen before is if you're trying to work out how much weight do you need to make a string vibrate. A really good way to work out how much you really need, how much extra weight you need from your arm, is just if you just pull your bow across, how much sound do you get? And you can all try this. You'll find at the heel, you actually get plenty. You get plenty of sound. And then as you get to the upper half, that's when it starts to weaken a bit. So the vast majority of the time, if you're in the lower half, you shouldn't be adding any extra weight. Let the weight of the bow do it. So, yeah. And as you get further down the bow, and as the weight transfers to the first two fingers, that's when you can add just a little bit to keep the sound going. So I think one more exercise, which is quite similar to Sarah's, is thinking about sound, is to see how close you can play to the bridge. I'll come a bit closer. And it should be possible, and you'll have to judge the sound for yourselves. It should be possible to play basically on the bridge if you're relaxed enough. And if you get funny sounds, all it means is that either your bow is going too fast, or you're pressing too hard. So it's something that's very important for violists. For whatever reason, it doesn't seem to matter quite as much for violins, but for us, it's very, very important to get the exact combination of speed and weight for whichever position you are. It's always very easy, and that's why students often very much like to play close to the fingerboard, because the sound comes easy. You don't have to do too much. And then as you get closer and closer to the bridge, it becomes more picky. You have to get it exactly right, otherwise it sounds awful. And that's where you get the ponticello sounds. But it's perfectly possible to still make a good sound there. You just can't go very fast.
Yeah.
And yeah, coming back to that exercise Sarah was getting you to do before about doing just long bows, I want you all to try one time. Just do a long bow and don't try and control anything. Listen to how the sound changes as you're going up down the bow. Do you find that there's there's very often a point somewhere around here where you get a little bits of like sort of bubbles in the sound. It slightly bounces. Do you find that?
Yeah.
That's the moment where you have to sort of engage your arm. So here you're not trying to control very much at all. And I sort of think of it as making sure that I relax everything so that the bow sinks into the string. Do you want to try that, everyone? And what I'd like to try and think is trying to keep a constant sound over the entire length of the bow, and just feel what do I need to relax to make that sound keep going. And like Sarah was saying before, you can watch the vibrations. And try and keep them at a constant width. So you can always see from the vibrations if there's bubbles in the sound or if it stops. So it can be really, really useful just to watch. And I don't think you can see this. It's too hard to see that. But you can see on your own. You can see, particularly on the bigger strings, how they expand and contract depending on what you're doing. And then you practice that at different speeds. Slower tends to be easier to control because you've got time to think about it. But it's all the same principle. It's about just figuring out what the string needs you to do at any moment. And if you can do that, the legato is easy, because all legato is making sure you don't get in the way of that. Easier said than done. And it comes back to that pulling feeling again, which we were talking about earlier. When you're pulling this way and then you simply pull the other way, you just don't do anything else. Sarah, have you got a better way of explaining that?
No, that's exactly it. Honestly, I feel like so much of playing the violin is me trying not to get in the way. Like, so much of it, actually, everything works so much better if you just don't get in the way too much, if you just kind of let everything happen a bit more naturally, a bit more relaxed. What Serenity was talking about, these bubbles in the sound, I always used to think of it as a shudder in the bow, because almost every bow has one. There's very few perfect bows on the planet. I know I've never met one that doesn't have a natural shudder actually somewhere, and very often it's somewhere around here. And all that happens when you get there is you've just got to do a little bit of a relax into it. But one of the things, and we haven't really, this is a slightly different topic, but it does relate to this a lot. I know that I have suffered terribly at times from bow shakes, which relates to nerves, obviously. And the reason that those happen is because you're tense. When you're nervous, you tend to tense up a little bit. You don't have quite the same control and relaxed control, basically, as you do when you're nice and relaxed and playing in your own room and doing your practice and everything's going fine. When you get on stage, what we tend to do is we tend to breathe shallower. And these bow shakes come from a bit of tension and a bit of kind of this nervous energy that happens. And the best way to work with them, and the time that they're going to come out the worst, is when there's already these natural kind of bubbles or shudders in your bow and you're not able to relax through them. Then you're going to get these shakes happening. And the best way to work through them is to work on that relaxation, to work on everything just going. And it's partly to do with breathing. Try to breathe into your stomach rather than breathing these kind of shallow chest breaths, and to think of your whole body as going and just feeling really nice and heavy and relaxed. And that kind of, for me, has been very helpful. I think it's still I don't know about you, Serenity, for me it's still a work in progress as a working musician.
It's definitely a work in progress, but one tip that I learned years ago, which I quite like, is that, of course, if you have shudders, bow shakes, your natural reaction is to sort of have the bow cringe away from the string. Like, your viola goes down and your bow goes up. And it's always hard to control the bow side. But one thing you can do is if you're feeling really nervous and feel like the sound's going to bounce, the bow's going to bounce, try just lifting up a bit, just a little bit, so that the viola is, or the instrument is holding up the bow. You don't feel like you have to hold it up.
Oh, I love that. I'm learning that. I always thought the other way around, relaxing into it, but that's such a great idea. Yeah.
But this one, because of course you can actually control quite a lot of sound without moving the bow. So I find it just a little mental thing. Doesn't always be, but you know, instead of worrying about my bow, I think about my viola.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to try that next time we're on stage. All right, so now I think the last thing, unless there's any questions about anything we've covered so far, we'll make sure you've got a bit of time at the end as well if something suddenly occurs to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about bouncing your bow, so spiccato, which for a lot of us is a really tricky thing, and surprisingly so, because your bow is made to bounce. The way that modern bows work is that they have this kind of rebound thing naturally happening.
The shutter is.
Yes, exactly. That's what the shutter is. But I think any of you, and Serenity can probably back me up here, any of you who may have taught or seen people pick up violins or violas or cellos or any stringed instrument for the first time, the first thing they do is this. The first thing they do, always, the first thing that happens is your bow bounces back from the string. And then we have to learn how to not do that. And then about 6 months later, we're suddenly trying to learn how to do it and how to control it. So I'm going to take you through just a couple of exercises that might help with this. Because again, the secret is to not get in the way, as with so much of what we've been talking about today. The secret is to just try not to screw it up too much. Just let it happen and it should be fine. So first of all, the thing that you want to find is where the bounce point is on your bow. Now this is different on every bow. Some of you might want to talk to your teacher about it. They might be able to help you, but it's usually somewhere in the middle. Mine's about here. It's just the upper side of the middle on my instrument. So have a little play around and just kind of play just some open strings. See where it happens just kind of naturally in the bow. You'll find it's probably somewhere around the middle. So find where that rebound, and one way that you can do it without even playing is just to let your bow bounce. So without actually playing any notes, right now I'm just letting it bounce against the string, and you'll find that there's one point on the bow that it happens really, really easily and feels like it'll just keep going if you do nothing to it. For me, that's about there. Now, the first exercise that I want you to do, firstly, let's just visualize the feel of when you throw a ball onto the ground. So that feel of it bouncing, and then on the way up, you catch it. So let's just pretend that we're doing that. We're throwing a ball, and on the way up, we're going to catch it. That's essentially what we do with our bows when we're doing spiccato, when we're bouncing the bow. We just have to do it really fast. But that feel of catching it on the way up. So you're not creating the bounce. If you try and create the bounce, this is what happens. It goes all over the place. What you're actually doing is dropping the bow and then catching it on the way back. So let's all do that now with our bows. So that feeling that you had of like you've just thrown a ball to the ground and then you're going to catch it on the way back. We're not going to play any notes at the moment. We're just going to feel that feeling of it dropping and then catching it. I don't know if you can see that very easily. So once you've found your kind of bouncy point, you're just going to drop the bow onto the string and catch it on the way back up. So this is where our nice strong bow hold and our pinky is coming into play, that strong pinky that we made really strong for all of our press-ups just earlier. And that flexibility in your hand allows it to just drop and then you catch it on the way up. Oh, we have a question?
Yes.
Sarah, hi.
I'm doing that facing this way so we
can see
how high your bow is.
Good idea. So for now, I'm not worrying about bow height so much as just kind of feeling, just letting it come back as far as it does naturally. Yeah, good plan. That's a way better angle, isn't it? Thank you, Ingrid. All right, now the next step that we're going to do, staying with the same, just that feeling of the natural drop, we're going to add a little bit of this way movement. So that's going to give us a note. Any note you want, just an open string is nice and easy. So we're just letting it drop, adding a little bit. Now, when that feels really, really comfortable and you want to not be doing too much to it, again, just try not to get in the way too much. Just let it happen naturally. Now, the way that we then control it as much as we can is just by controlling how far it rebounds back. So that's how then you can control the speed of it. If you're playing it quite fast, what I'm doing there is just letting it rebound a little way back. It's not rebounding very far. If I want to do much slower, much bigger kind of noise, then I'm going to let a bit more weight come in from my arm and I'm going to let it bounce higher. But the speed is related to how far back it comes. And once you learn to kind of let that bounce happen without trying to control it, if you're trying to control it, what you'll find is all of this starts getting tense. I know when my spiccato isn't working, it's almost always because of tension right here. None of that needs to be tense. This muscle needs to be nice and strong, but your pinky is relaxed. And if you can, sorry?
And that's where the bent pinky is so important, because you can't control it if it's straight. You just, at least for violin and viola, I know cello and bass are a bit different.
Oh yeah, guys are, yeah.
You just simply do not have the control at this angle. I think it's different for cellos, maybe because it's quite a different angle. But for us,
yeah.
Spiccato, like this.
I like to think of this like a suspension system in a car. You know how you have these springs that are going along and helping to kind of cushion all of these judders that are happening while you're going. Exactly. I see somebody bouncing up and down. That's exactly it. So this here is your suspension system, and it's helping to soften all of that. You can't soften it unless you're taking some of that impact as it comes in. So there's this kind of thing going on all the time. So we've done this stuff. There's another way, just basically try not to get in the way. That's the very spiccato kind of thing. Now there's another thing. So spiccato is either from the string or from above the string. So what we were just talking about with the bouncing and dropping, that's when you're coming from above the string, and then you just control it by how far you let it bounce back before you catch it. There's another one that you tend to do when it's very, very fast, and that's from the string. And this is where it becomes really important where in the bow you are. So that's where you've got your bounce point for. And that you start off here, you start off on the string, and it's just a little sideways tilt like that to the string. And when it's fast enough, it comes off. And for me, I actually almost let my pinky go off of the bow. That's when your pinky is not controlling it, but it's this tiny, if I'm really slowing it down, it'll go like this. So it's a little sideways thing, but when you speed it up, so it's your wrist is doing these kind of circly things. So that's a spiccato from the string, but it only works fast. You can only do that when it's really fast. So those for me are my two spiccatos, is either coming from away from the string and it's letting it drop and catching it, and that's controlled by how far I let it come up before I catch it. That controls the speed that you're going to do it. And from the string, I need to give it a little impetus by just helping these little circles happen. Did you have anything to add to that, Serenity, with the...
Maybe just to the spiccato, the drop and catch, is if it sounds like it's really sort of spicky, it doesn't have much note in it, just adjusting the angle of the bow hairs a little bit, so you're not, when you reach the string, it's not touching all of the hairs at once, it's just a little bit on an angle. That slightly softens it so that it's not as harsh. And of course, depending on what sort of music it is, it might be quite a lot on an angle if you want a very soft spiccato. But if you want more of an articulation, then it comes back to almost all the hair. And you can feel how it just slightly adjusts. It's all bouncing on the same in the same area, but it just adjusts the sound slightly. I think that was all. Yes, the one where you come from the string, that's the one where you're trying as much as possible to get out of the way.
Yeah.
Do it yourself, that's why you can take the pinky off, because you're trying to just let the bow do its thing.
Yeah, it almost works better when you're trying not to bounce it. It's a weird, it doesn't, feels a bit counterintuitive, but your bow will bounce naturally if you let it. Like we were talking about, the first thing that most people do is bounce their bow, do a perfect ricochet as soon as you hand them a bow, and then spend the next 6 months learning not to do that, basically. So your bow is made to bounce. It's got all of this rebound kind of built in. We just have to try not to get too much in the way of it. Are there any questions about that? I know that I think in about a minute or two, we're going to get a message saying, okay, you've got 5 minutes left, wrap it up. So I want to make sure that we don't miss anyone out if there are. I just literally got it from Selena saying 5 minutes. All right. So does anybody have any questions? Yes, we have one over here. Hello.
Hi. So sort of what suggestions do you have for when we're trying to do spiccato like really, really quiet?
Well, what Serenity was saying about how you come to the string, so the angle of your bow here. So she was talking about rather than being flat, you're going to be turned. What you'll do is just kind of turn your hand a little bit like this, so that you're coming with less bow here. Basically, is hitting the string, so it's going to make a bit less sound. I don't know if you want to. Serenity, is there more to say?
No, that's absolutely it. And then, of course, going closer to the fingerboard, though, you find it's much harder to get definition the closer to the fingerboard you get.
Yeah, I struggle with keeping it quiet and then also keeping a good sound.
Yeah, to be honest, it is a struggle. I don't know that there's anyone who finds that super easy, but yeah, having that kind of thinking about, there are a few basic ways that you create sound. One is how much bow you're using, so your bow speed. One is how much weight you're allowing in from your arm, and one is where you are on the string and how how much bow here is pulling on the string. So all of those little facets are kind of things that you think about when you're creating your sound. And with this spiccato, it is hard to get the articulation when it's quiet as well, because the more dirt that you let in, the more sound is going to be created. But yeah, kind of playing with all of those things, where you are on the string, how far you're turned over, all of that kind of stuff, I think is.
Yes, to add to that, Sarah, I think a really good thing to do with spiccato and anything to do with the bow in general is just to experiment, is to have a play, see how it sounds in different areas, and notice sort of if you're getting a harsher sound, think about what it is that you're doing, because there might be pieces somewhere along the line where you need that sound. No sound is ever wrong. It's just maybe wrong for that piece. Yeah. So a lot of experiment.
Put it away for later.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And adding to that is, it's really good to think about what the bow does in different areas. Like the bows are wonderfully versatile, modern bows. So they're really good at doing everything. We just need to figure out depending on what sort of sound we want, where we should find it. Like very often, if it's not working because you're in the wrong part of the bow for that. So if you want a big, beautiful sound, sorry, the sound tends to be biggest closer to the heel, nice and relaxed. If you want, some pieces that they want the sound with lots of overtones, the ponticello sound. So if you have to make that sound, or if you're trying to do harmonics, that's also really good close to the bridge. But it's not as good when you're at the fingerboard. So figuring out what works and what doesn't in different parts and everywhere. Lots of experiment.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. I think you've demystified, explained things really beautifully to many of us. So thank you very much, Sarah and Serenity. And it's just
No worries.
wonderful to have everybody on the screen participate, those also listening in on the session. If anybody would like to switch on their video now, it would be really great for us to give us, I think everybody deserves a round of applause, in fact. Video and your audio, and let's have a quick round of applause. Thank you very much.
Yay. Awesome. I think somebody had their hand up just before. I'm not sure if they were asking a question. Was that Zoe? Zoe, you had your hand up. Did you have a question? Do you want to just turn on your microphone quickly just before we finish? Sorry, Kathy. I just don't want her to miss out asking a question.
For the staccato on picking up from the string, is it kind of like that or kind of like that?
So I whacking my violin on music stand. So did you mean when you're doing that kind of bounce back from the string?
Is that kind of more kind of bouncy and peppy, or is it kind of a bit more smooth and?
Well, honestly, it just depends on what kind of sound you want. So if you're doing, like Serenity was talking about, something, you know, like a brush thing, you're going to add more of this movement. If you want something very, very spiky, then you're going to have less of that movement, and it's more of the sound of the actual hitting the string. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's again what she was saying, is just experimenting and finding those different sounds. There isn't a, this is the way you do it, this is the correct way to do a spiccato. There are thousands of spiccatos, and it depends on what you're actually playing very much. But that first basic is just kind of feeling the bounce back. Then you're going to add a bit of this, and what that exercise is supposed to do is just help you find the feel of the bounce and find the feel of catching it and where you actually catch it as it comes back up. But yeah, there isn't really a right or wrong. It's all about the different sounds that you can find, really.
I think it's quite useful to have an idea of what sound you want, and then try and do it. Because if you don't have an idea of what you want, then you won't recognise it when you get it.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I was going to ask, does anybody else from who's been observing that has any questions that they'd like to put forward? Remember to switch your audio off if you have got a question.
No, oh, we've got a thank you. Oh, you're very welcome.
Lovely.
Hey there. Thought I'd take an opportunity for one last question. When it comes to spiccato with your bow, what do you regard as the ideal level of tension to have it wound at?
That's a very good question. So, sorry, Serenity. Wait, you go. Okay. I think that the ideal for most bows, modern bows anyway, with how they're made, is you still need to have a little bit of that curve. If you lose that curve, if it becomes straight, then the bow isn't able to actually function how it's supposed to. There is supposed to be a small amount of curve that way. So if I don't know how clearly you can see, that's about what I play at. If I'm playing something super soft, and super, like we were talking about, the kind of brushed thing, I might actually loosen it slightly more. If we're playing something that I'm going to really smash into the strings, you know, some massive Brahms symphony or something, I might actually tighten it a bit. But for the most part, I don't actually adjust it that much. I know some people that do an awful lot, that play different bows for different music. I mean, I'd love to have many bows for different music. I've just got this one here, and I tend to just think that most bows function the best if you have them sort of set up vaguely how they're meant to work, and I think that you need just a tiny gradient of that curve left. I don't know, Serenity, if you have more.
Oh, absolutely. A little bit of a curve, and one thing that I think, if you see people in concerts adjusting their bow, very often it's because the temperature has changed the tension. They're not to change it for different pieces necessarily, though I know some people. It's just that if it's hot, then it can change. If it's cold, it can change. So if you watch me in concerts, you'll notice that I very often, just before I play, just slightly adjust, just
Yeah.
to make sure it stays in where I expect it to be.
But yeah, you're right. It's totally temperature. Almost every time that I'm adjusting it on stage, the temperature on stage is changing all the day. Usually it's getting hotter because of lights and all of these 1,000 people watching us. So that's usually why people are adjusting. But yeah, most of the time I just leave it. Well, I try and keep it about the same tension.
Yes.
Lovely. Thank you so much. I was just going to say, if you do have any more questions, please feel free to email me through the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra website. Our emails are on there, and I'll forward it through to Sarah and Serenity, and they'd be delighted to hear from you. Also, it's really interesting to see where people are from. I know we've got some people from Auckland here, and I see Monica we've got down there. So, and Rangiora we've got as well, and Christchurch. I'm always just fascinated and delighted to see people from all over the place. Thank you for coming along. Just to end with, I would just like to say that we've got a couple of other online things coming up. So next week at the same time, we've got a Your Turn to Shine class, which is for adult learners to play for each other. And we'll have a couple of CSO players on board. So that'll be just a time of sharing and hanging out together and enjoying a bit of music together. So I encourage you to register for that. And then if you would like to create a bubble band, tomorrow night from 7 to 8, we're going to be running a band workshop. And all you need to do is grab all the people in your band, and we'll teach you how to make a band out of whatever you've got. So you can find out about that looking on our Christchurch Symphony Orchestra Facebook page. So that's a fun activity for families to do together. Any generation, any skill, you guys can make a bubble band. Okay, thank you so much for the session. You're welcome to hang around at the end of this meeting. Unmute yourselves. But I wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today. Noho ora mai.
Lovely to see you all.
Thanks for organising this, Kathy.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Bye, guys. Put your hand up quickly if anybody did have any more questions. I'm happy to stay on here for a few minutes if you did want to ask anything. Otherwise, no. Well, thank you everyone for being game to just to try things out. That was quite fun. And good job. Very nice to see you all. Everybody's kind of despairing. Awesome. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. Nice to see you, Serenity. I miss you. Far away, not getting to play together.
Hopefully it won't be too long.
Yes. Fingers crossed. Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye.